She had once been a pure, lovely girl next door, but then her younger sister was struck with a terminal illness and was on the brink of death. So she went alone in search of the Vampire King. In the end, she tricked the vampire through a carefully laid scheme. She obtained his vampire blood, but who could have expected her own brother to betray her? After taking the precious blood, he sold her off to a filthy slave camp. There, she suffered endless torment and humiliation. Every day was like living in hell, worse than death. In the end, in utter despair, she chose to die with dignity, using the Vampire King's dagger to end her tragic life. Perhaps heaven took pity on her. She was actually reborn, and reborn to the very day she had just entered the vampire castle, before everything had begun. Leah silently swore that this time she would never repeat the same mistakes. She would cling tightly to the Vampire King and survive. Just then, the butler walked in, interrupting her thoughts. "Which one is Leah?" Pulling herself together, Leah answered respectfully. "It's me, my lord." The butler nodded. "Please come with me." When she entered the room next door, she saw the Vampire King, Vilis, sitting upright on his throne, just as cold and noble as in her previous life. Vilis walked up to her and lifted her chin with one hand, just as Leah stood there at a loss. Vilis pulled her hard into his arms, bared his fangs, and was about to bite into her long, pale neck when Leah suddenly said, "If you let me do it this time, your majesty will have an unforgettable experience." Vilis gave her a wicked smile. "Then I'll wait and see." The butler immediately brought over a dagger and a goblet. After what she had suffered in her previous life, this was nothing to Leah. Without hesitation, she picked up the blade, lightly cut her wrist, and soon a goblet filled with fresh blood was placed before Vilis. Vilis picked up the goblet. "The Milan fragrance on you is rather fresh and refined. But didn't anyone tell you that what I hate most is the scent of Milan?" As soon as he finished speaking, he smashed the goblet to pieces. Leah was stunned. Why was this different from her previous life? Back then, Vilis had simply drunk the wine and been drugged by her. Vilis moved to bite Leah's neck again, but for some reason he suddenly stopped. "I don't just hate the smell on you. I despise those deceitful eyes of yours even more." Then he had the butler throw Leah a bag of gold coins before turning and leaving, while Leah stood there in confusion. "Vampire King, why aren't you following the script this time?" She was driven out of the castle. Out of kindness, the butler reminded her, "Miss Leah, our king does not dislike someone for no reason." Leah stood there helplessly as the miserable memories of her previous life resurfaced. "Madam Butler, please wait. I am grateful for the king's generosity, but I don't need gold coins. Could you exchange them for some low-ranking vampire blood instead?" Though the butler found it strange, she still did as Leah asked. When Vilis heard about it, he became rather interested too. He decided to go up to the city wall and see what Leah was planning. Just like in her previous life, Leah went to the woods as agreed to meet her brother. In her previous life, this was where her brother had taken the Vampire King's blood from her, then knocked her unconscious and sold her to the slave mill. But this time, she would not only rewrite her fate, she would take revenge. Her brother was still urging her to hand over the blood. Leah tightened her grip behind her back, on the syringe filled with vampire blood. "Brother, I worked so hard to get this. Shouldn't you at least take a look first?" He glanced at her in surprise. "If you insist, then bring it out." Leah took out an oil lamp she had prepared long ago. "Brother, come a little closer. The light is better here." Suspecting nothing, he stepped near her. Leah pulled out the syringe hidden behind her and plunged it hard into his neck. Her brother's face twisted in pain at once. "You bitch, what did you do to me?" Leah answered with a bitter smile. "My dear brother, the pain you're feeling now isn't even 1/10,000th of what I once suffered." He still struggled and threatened her. "What are you talking about? The Neela family won't let you off." At last he collapsed, and Leah dragged him onto a wooden boat. The little bit of sibling affection left in her heart drifted away with the current along with the boat. After witnessing all this with his own eyes, Vilis immediately ordered his men to investigate the Neela family, because he felt that things were becoming more and more interesting. After dealing with everything, Leah returned to the vampire castle. She begged Vilis to let her stay, because she knew very well that in her current situation, this was the only powerful protector she could rely on. Vilis said coldly, "What gives you the right to make me keep you?" Yet inwardly he scoffed. This woman is really greedy. She won't stop until she gets my blood, huh? Could it be that Vilis, like Leah, had also been reborn? He was the cold, proud, and noble vampire king. Anyone bitten by him would obey him completely. Only this girl had escaped his fangs. Not only had she drugged him, she had stripped off his clothes and drawn his blood. For the noble vampire king, that was nothing short of a colossal humiliation. That damn nightmare again. Villies jolted awake. As the vampire king, dreams usually meant prophecy. And sure enough, the girl from last night's dream had really appeared. To keep the dream from coming true, Villies had driven her away at once. What he hadn't expected was that not long afterward, the girl came running back, kneeling in front of him, crying and begging to stay by his side, willing to offer up everything she had. That completely baffled Villies. He couldn't tell whether the girl truly wanted to stay as his blood servant, or whether she was still after his noble blood. After thinking it over and deciding it was better to avoid trouble, Villies still decided to send the girl away. In her desperation, she grabbed both hands around his arm and said she would even be willing to serve as a maid. At that, Villies bent down and lifted her chin. I told you before, I hate those eyes of yours. Your eyes are unclean. They lie. Leave now. My patience has its limits. Hearing this, the girl fell into despair. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Suddenly, she grabbed a syringe and thrust it toward her own throat. If the king doesn't want me, then what meaning is there in living? At the critical moment, a streak of white light flashed through the air and knocked the syringe from her hand. It was Villies who had stopped her. Since you do have some courage, you may stay for now. And just like that, the girl, Leah, remained in the vampire castle. She was one step closer to successfully securing a powerful backer. Villies was recalling the events of the day when he suddenly sensed unusual movement in the castle. It turned out Leah wasn't sleeping in the middle of the night, carrying a lantern full of fireflies. It was different from her previous life, so she wanted to find out why. But after searching for a long time, she still couldn't find any clues. Aside from a cute little white bat, just as Leah was thinking hard, she heard footsteps outside and hurriedly hid under the desk in fright. Naturally, the one who came in was the vampire king, Villies. Muttering to himself, he said, "It seems there's a little mouse in the castle looking for something." Then he bent down and looked directly under the desk. "Caught you, little mouse. What are you doing in my study in the middle of the night?" Leah quickly improvised. "I caught a bag of fireflies. Because I wanted to surprise your majesty." It was such a clumsy excuse that not even a fool would believe it, much less the vampire king. Villies casually conjured up a crystal ball. "This is a lie-detecting orb. If you tell the truth, it will light up. If you lie, it won't react at all, and then you'll be in trouble. They say a woman's mouth is full of lies. But come on, I'm a vampire too. You can't keep blaming everything on me alone, can you? One moment she can stand in front of me looking obedient and respectful, and the next she can drug me, strip off my clothes, and draw my blood. Just when I'm furious and want to teach her a lesson, she can act as if nothing happened and come right back to my side. First she looks at me all pitiful and innocent. Then she starts crying like rain on pear blossoms and telling me about her hardships. After a combination attack like that, even the coldest vampire can't hold out. I finally managed to convince myself to forgive her, and 2 seconds later, she starts making trouble again. In the dead of night, instead of sleeping, she runs into the study and rummages through all the files. And when I ask what she's doing, she says she was catching fireflies to surprise me. She's openly fooling me and treating me like an idiot. She can't even be bothered to make up a proper lie. I'm a noble vampire king, Villies. Do I really look that easy to fool? Enough is enough. To expose her lie, Villies brought out his ultimate weapon, the lie-detecting orb. Tell the truth, and it lights up. As for lies, let's see how I deal with her. After considering for a moment, Villies asked the first question. "Why are you so determined to stay in the castle?" Without even blinking, Leah answered quickly, "I want to stay by the king's side." As expected, the lie-detecting orb showed no reaction. Not giving up, Villies asked the second question. "What did you do with the vampire blood you took?" Leah answered just as quickly. "I use it against my enemy." The lie-detecting orb still didn't react. The atmosphere turned a little awkward. Helpless and speechless, Villies asked the third question. "Why did you appear here?" Unexpectedly, Leah reacted strongly this time. Tears welled up in her eyes as she suddenly threw herself into Villies' arms. "Because only by your majesty's side do I feel safe. For you, I'm willing to give everything." Then Leah pressed her lips to Villies, and at the same moment, the lie-detecting orb lit up. Villies was completely stunned by the sudden kiss, but it really did feel sweet. This damned possessiveness of mine is getting out of hand. In that case, I'll punish you properly. The next morning, Leah woke up to find her body covered in kiss marks. One could imagine how intense the battle last night had been. At that moment, the butler came in with a change of clothes and, as instructed, took her to bathe. Soaking in a luxurious tub filled with milk and spices, Leah recalled everything that had happened yesterday, as well as the intense battle that night. Leah instantly blushed scarlet. Was this really the brave girl who had fought the Vampire King so fiercely last night? What she didn't know was that the alluring scene of her bathing was being live-streamed in front of Villies in full 360-degree high definition. Suddenly, Leah noticed a cute little white bat by the tub. It was the same one she had seen in the study the night before. Her girlish heart melting instantly, she picked up the little bat and fussed over it in her palms. Annoyed beyond endurance, the little bat hurriedly flew away. Yet inwardly it was puzzled. No one else can see me, so how did she? After washing up, the butler helped Leah into a formal dress and then brought her before the Vampire King, Villies, to report on the investigation into the Neela family. The head of the Neela family, Mariki, is said to be bedridden, but when my subordinates went to his bedroom, there was no one there. Hearing this, Villies signaled, send more people and increase surveillance. Also, have Leah come serve me during my meal. Not long after, the butler brought Leah in together with another blood servant. Villies directly signaled for Leah to begin first. Leah took the dagger without even furrowing her brow, lightly cut herself, and soon a crystal goblet filled with blood was placed before Villies. Villies took a sip, then wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth in satisfaction before lifting Leah's chin. Are you afraid? Humans fear vampires, and even more so becoming a vampire's food. Leah looked at him with innocent wide eyes. I'm not afraid of vampires, and your majesty is different from other vampires. Growing emotional, she even clasped Villies' hand in both of hers. From the moment I entered the castle, Leah belonged to the king. It was a wonder Villies could still stay clear-headed. He flung Leah's hand away. Don't think sweet words can bewitch me. Then he had the other blood servant come release blood instead. Leah grumbled inwardly. Looks like that trick wasn't as effective as it was yesterday. After Villies finished his meal, he specifically had the blood servant named Taro go receive a reward. After Villies left, Taro squatted on the ground in pain. Leah kindly wanted to help him up, but Taro refused to appreciate it all. You failed at seducing the king just now, and now you're trying to win me over? In the castle dining hall, Leah's appearance had already drawn everyone's attention. So that's the one who stayed in the king's bedroom all night yesterday. She definitely knows how to seduce people. Good thing the king doesn't fall for that. Leah glanced at them and chose to ignore them. Then one of them deliberately bumped into Leah's arm, as if by accident, causing the utensils in her hand to clatter to the floor. Before Leah could say anything, Taro started making a scene. How dare you carelessly bump into me? Kneel and apologize right now, or I'll teach you the rules of this castle myself. As he spoke, he raised a hand to slap her. In a flash, Leah caught Taro's wrist, then flipped him to the ground with a smooth reverse move. You better not provoke me, because you have no idea where I've crawled out from. And if you knock over my things, you'll pay me back exactly as they were. I may not show my claws, but don't mistake me for some sickly house cat. Late that night, Villies fell asleep and dreamed of a fat man with curly hair whipping Leah. Villies woke up with a start. I can't let something like that happen. It seems I really do need to do something. Just then his heart sensed something again. Once more, Leah wasn't sleeping in the middle of the night. She was wandering around the castle, carrying a bottle of red wine. Does Leah not need sleep at night, or what? At that moment, Villies drifted down from the night sky. What are you doing now in the middle of the night? Hearing him, Leah turned around, but her foot slipped. She was already suspended in midair, just about to fall from the castle's high wall. At the critical moment, Villies leapt forward, caught Leah in his arms in midair, and then flew back gracefully with her. You want to die? Did you ask my permission first? That was an accident. Who brings a bottle of red wine if they really want to die? After the scare, the two of them sat romantically on the city wall, gazing at the starry sky. Weren't you baring your claws and acting fierce during the day? Why are you this frightened at night? Leah looked dejected. I'm afraid everything now is just a dream. I'm afraid that when I wake up, I'll return to the darkness again. Only when I look at the stars do I feel that I'm still alive. Villies smiled lightly. Instead of worrying about the future, you do better to please me. If I happen to be in a good mood, I might casually solve all your problems for you. as expected of the Vampire King. Even his flirtation sounded domineering. Then Vilis suddenly thought of something interesting. Come, I'll take you to play a game. As he spoke, he picked Leah up and flew into the night sky. Beneath the gauzy canopy, the two spent another loving night together. Meanwhile, on the other side, the butler had already arranged a room for Leah's younger sister, Neela. Neela probed carefully, asking whether she could stay together with her sister Leah. The butler told her that Leah was often required to attend the king by his side. Hearing that, Neela was very envious of her sister. After all, the Vampire King was an extremely powerful backer, and Neela's illness urgently required the Vampire King's blood. Otherwise, she truly wouldn't live much longer. Although her sister had promised to get the blood for her, it was always better to rely on herself than on others. At that moment, Leah came to visit her younger sister, and the moment she walked in, she saw Neela collapsed on the table. Seeing her sister arrive, Neela said weakly, "Sister, I probably don't have long to live. Every day my heart aches as if it's being twisted apart." Leah instantly became anxious. "There's no time left. Tomorrow I have to beg the king properly. Maybe I'll be able to get some of his blood. If I succeed, I can cut ties completely with the Neela family from then on. If not, I'll have to think of another way. But how should I even ask? The king treats me so well. He should agree to such a small request, right? The king likes the rose cookies I make. Maybe I can surprise him." While thinking this over in the garden, Leah gathered rose petals, without noticing that the Vampire King, Vilis, had come up behind her. "Why did you run off to the garden?" "I didn't expect that in such harsh conditions, roses could still bloom this splendidly." Then Vilis very naturally interlaced his fingers with Leah's. Leah couldn't help feeling a little shy. "Your Majesty has saved me so many times. I have no way to repay you, so I can only quietly do what little I should. I only hope the king will like it." Vilis looked at her indulgently. "How could I not like it? Look at your hands. You've hurt them tending these roses." As he spoke, Vilis used some kind of spell or magic to heal the wounds on Leah's hands. "You don't need to work so hard in the future, and you don't need to do anything for me." Leah was startled. "You don't like it when I do these things?" Vilis gave no explanation. Instead, he answered with action, pulling Leah into his arms and fiercely kissing her lips. As passion deepened, Vilis lowered Leah down among the flowers, heedless of the thorns. "You've gone to all this trouble to please me. What is it that you want?" Leah answered between breaths. "Can I have a vial of your blood?" At that, Vilis stopped moving. His gaze gradually turned cold as he slowly stood up. "So everything you've done with such care was just to get my blood?" Leah hurried to explain. "It's not like that. My younger sister needs your blood to treat her illness." Vilis remained cold. "Do you even know what a vampire's blood represents?" "Forget it. Even if I told you, you wouldn't understand." Leah still begged, "Your Majesty, is it really impossible? Just a tiny bit would be enough." Vilis turned away furiously. "You really had ulterior motives. To get my blood, you were even willing to offer up your body." Watching Vilis turn and leave, Leah was still trying to explain. But Vilis could not hear a word of it now and strode away directly. She had once been a pure, lovely girl in the bloom of youth. To save her dying younger sister, the girl Leah went alone to the terrifying Vampire King, only to obtain the legendary blood of the Vampire King. Inside the ancient castle, after many twists and turns, Leah relied on her persistence and kindness to win the favor of the Vampire King, Vilis. She herself had also given her heart to him, just when she thought the time was right, and asked for Vilis' blood to save her sister. Vilis misunderstood and thought she had approached him with ulterior motives all along, solely to get his precious blood, and furiously refused her. At the same time, Leah's younger sister, Neela, failed to understand her sister's painstaking efforts. While grieving over her own tragic fate, she also envied the favor Leah had gained from Vilis. Under that twisted mindset, selfish thoughts began to grow. At that moment, Leah, who had failed to get the blood she wanted, came to visit her sister. Neela looked at her expectantly, believing that with how favored her sister was now, obtaining even a tiny bit of blood shouldn't have been a problem. Unfortunately, Leah's answer left her utterly disappointed. She thought her sister only cared about pleasing Vilis and didn't truly care about her life at all. In that case, she would have to rely on herself. With that thought, Neela burst into tears. "Sister, I've already thought it through. If I really can't be cured, then even if I die, I want to die in your arms. Actually, I prepared devil vine powder long ago. but every time I thought of how heartbroken you'd be, I never took it." After delivering the speech she had long prepared, Neela thought to herself, "I've said this much already. Sister, surely you'll do something now, right?" Leah was instantly horrified. "How could you be carrying devil vine powder? This stuff is forbidden among the Blood Clan. If it's discovered, you'll be executed on the spot." Unbeknownst to her, Vilis had also arrived outside the door. After calming down, he had recalled the beautiful times the two of them had shared. He thought Leah simply wanted to save her younger sister and had no other intentions. Thinking that, Vilis hesitated no longer and knocked on the door. "Leah, are you in there?" Leah was badly startled. She hurried to hide her younger sister Neela, but in the panic, the devil vine powder in her hand was not hidden in time. "Your Majesty, why have you come now?" Leah looked flustered. Vilis bent down and wrapped an arm around Leah's shoulders. "Do you really want my blood that badly?" Gazing at Leah's exquisite face so close to his, Vilis suddenly felt his heart burn hot. He directly picked Leah up, placed her onto the bed, and lowered himself to kiss her. Thinking of his sister still hiding there, Leah quickly refused. "No, I don't want this." Vilis looked puzzled. "So if I don't give you my blood, you dare reject me? What is that smell in this room? It's familiar, and yet it disgusts me." Following the scent, Vilis reached behind Leah and took something out. His gaze instantly turned icy. Well, so it's devil vine powder. Do you know the consequences of deceiving me? Now tell me, why is there devil vine powder in your room?" Leah panicked. "If I tell the truth, my sister will never be able to bear the king's wrath." Left with no choice, Leah forced herself to say, "I brought it with me when I first came to the castle. I thought that if I couldn't endure it, I would end things myself here. Later, I realized your Majesty was nothing like the rumors said. Instead, you've treated me very well. Please forgive me." Hearing that, Vilis stood up. "Devil vine powder can take a life, yes, but it must be mixed with a beauty's tears. Who would go to all that trouble? Do you take me for a fool? Again and again, you lied to me. All of your obedience was just an act. I really underestimated you. You truly are willing to use any means necessary." Never before had Leah seen Vilis so enraged. She still tried desperately to explain, but Vilis said he would never believe her sweet lies again. Then he summoned the guards and had Leah locked in the dungeon. Neela hid in the shadows and witnessed everything. Yet as she watched her sister being dragged away to the dungeon, she chose not to say a single word in her defense, because she thought that once her sister was gone, the opportunity would finally belong to her. The young girl before us was named Leah. Her life had truly been full of hardship. In her previous life, she had gone alone to save her younger sister, only to be betrayed by her own brother, sold into the slave pits, and tormented without end. At last, in this life, she was reborn from the ashes. She won the Vampire King's favor and, for the first time, felt a sense of safety. Leah thought everything was finally moving in a better direction. But then her younger sister Neela came to her. On the surface, it looked like she missed her dearly, but in truth she harbored ulterior motives and wanted to replace her sister. To do so, Neela brought carefully prepared devil vine powder into the old castle. At the same time, she exploited Leah's sympathy. Kind-hearted Leah couldn't bear for her sister to be blamed, so she silently endured Vilis' wrath and was thrown into the dungeon. No one knew how much time had passed in the dungeon when Leah was awakened. She turned her head and saw that it was the girl she had once saved from a wealthy merchant during one of her outings with Vilis. When the girl learned Leah had been imprisoned, she had secretly brought food to visit her. Leah anxiously asked how the king had been lately. "Is he still angry with me?" The girl told her, "The king is very angry. He hasn't summoned any blood servants these past few days." Then, looking worried, she added, "I heard you try to harm the king's body. You'll be executed at the mat." Leah sighed. "I never once wanted to hurt the king, but the king won't listen to any explanation I make." The girl clenched her teeth. "Then run. The castle seems to have something going on these days. I'll see if I can find a chance to get you out. I should go now. Hold on a little longer and wait for my message." Leah quickly added, "Please also look after my younger sister. Her name is Neela." Meanwhile, inside the castle, Vilis received an invitation to a banquet from the Human Emperor. The GS season was approaching, and no one knew what exactly the Human Emperor was plotting. Before setting out, Vilis looked over the blood servants who would accompany him, and when he didn't hear the familiar voice that moved his heart, he frowned involuntarily. This banquet is quite large. Will likely stay several days. These blood servants won't be enough. The butler immediately understood. "Then shall we bring the one from the dungeon as well?" Vilis nodded in satisfaction. "Yes, give her a chance to atone." The party set out. This was when the difference in treatment became obvious. The other blood servants all rode on horseback. Only Leah was seated inside the carriage with Vilis. She couldn't help muttering inwardly, "The king has clearly already forgiven me. He even specifically let me ride in his carriage. So why does he still look so cold to me? And his hand is exposed in the sunlight. Why is nothing happening to it?" To welcome Vilis' arrival, the human emperor even set off a grand fireworks display, as though announcing that this was an important diplomatic meeting between the human race and the Blood Clan. Yet inside the palace, the human emperor, Zibalai, wore a smug smile. This time, inviting the king of the Blood Clan here is not only about the handover of seasonal matters, but also to ask you to admire one of my treasures. Vilis looked exasperated. "Just how idle are you? You summoned me all this way just to look at your treasure?" Zibalai casually draped an arm over Vilis' shoulder. "Don't complain. Look first, then talk." He then motioned for the servants to quickly bring out the treasure. When it was presented and opened, it turned out to be a ring inlaid with a large, precious gemstone. Vilis focused and realized that this gem was none other than the keepsake of his mother that had once been accidentally lost in the palace. Zibalai picked up the ring and looked at it. "I came upon this by chance. Legend says it's a treasured relic of the Witch Clan. I know nothing about such things, so I invited the king of the Blood Clan to appraise it." Vilis took the ring, pondering the true intention behind Zibalai's actions. Meanwhile, not far away, Leah sat uneasily. It was her first time in the imperial palace, and with so many so-called noblemen weaving around in elegant dances, she couldn't help feeling constrained. At that moment, one nobleman noticed the solitary Leah. Struck by her beauty, he dared to invite her to dance right under Vilis' nose. Leah naturally refused, but the nobleman pretended to do it by accident and spilled the red wine in his hand all over Leah. Completely unaware that disaster was about to fall on his head, he apologized while ill-intentionally pulling Leah along to change her clothes. Seeing all this, Vilis had already reached the limit of his patience and was just about to teach this presumptuous noble a lesson. But suddenly, a strange sensation surged through his body. Vilis' face turned instantly cold. "Zibalai, what did you do to me?" The attack order also stated that the human emperor would execute Verlis' followers on the cliff outside the city. Leia immediately ran toward the outskirts as fast as she could, because from what she knew of Verlis, even if he was badly wounded, his pride would never allow him to stand by and watch his subordinates die. Left behind where he stood, Count Rose looked utterly baffled. Hadn't everything been going smoothly just now? Why had she run off at the critical moment? At last, Leia reached the cliff outside the city and quietly hid behind a huge boulder. She heard human Emperor Zibalai delivering a passionate speech. "I declare that the humiliating days when countless of our people were oppressed by the vampires and reduced to blood slaves are over. From this day forward, I shall take full control of Jizhou and Jie and become the new master of the entire continent. Let us welcome the coming of Jizhou and cheer for our bright future." Thunderous applause instantly broke out from the crowd. Seeing all this, Zibalai grew excited. "Verlis, if you still refuse to show yourself, then I will force you out." He immediately signaled the soldiers to carry out the execution. Verlis' guards did not beg for mercy. Instead, they shouted, "Our king will avenge us." Hearing that, Zibalai dug at his ear. "A bunch of filthy vampire vermin. Cut out their tongues first." One of the vampire guards furiously shouted back, "Human Emperor, are you feeling guilty? Do you dare tell everyone the truth about what happened back then? The human race lost the war to the princes and was nearly wiped out. It was the human emperor who offered up the people of 3 cities to summon the vampire king and promised to present blood slave generation after generation in exchange for the vampire's protection. Are you planning to tear up that pact now?" The crowd watching erupted in an uproar, and Zibalai's face darkened. "You say I broke my word? What honor is there to speak of with creatures like you who can't stand the light? Chop him up and throw him into the sea to feed the dogs." A guard at the side looked stunned. "Your Majesty, there are no dogs in the sea." Humiliated in front of everyone, Zibalai flew into a rage. "Someone, behead him too. From her hiding place, Leia watched everything unfold and thought to herself that, despite his regal appearance, the human emperor was unbelievably cruel. When he lost control, he even killed his own men. If the king really fell into his hands, who knew what would happen? The human emperor had arranged all this to lure the king out, because he knew that if he didn't get rid of the king today, once the king returned to the castle and recovered from his injuries, the human emperor, and even the entire human race, would have to bear the vampire king's wrath. Realizing this, Leia was about to rush out and stop it all when a strong hand suddenly grabbed hers from behind. For the sake of his ambition to unify the continent, human emperor Xibalai had to kill the vampire king while he was heavily wounded. Otherwise, once Verlies recovered and returned, the human emperor would never be able to withstand the vampire king's fury. So Xibalai had once again laid an elaborate trap just to lure Verlies out. Hidden in the dark, Leia witnessed it all and was about to rush out and stop the plot. But the person who stopped her was not Verlies. It was Count Rose. Whether he was truly love-struck or just hopelessly devoted, who knew? In any case, he appeared just in time and stopped Leia from throwing her life away. Leia felt helpless and confused. Many of those people had become blood servants only because they had no other choice. Deep down, they were still human. So why wouldn't the human emperor spare even them? Count Rose explained, because the human emperor is suspicious by nature. He fears that those who once followed the vampire king may harbor divided loyalties. He doesn't care why they sided with the vampires. To him, it's better to kill 1,000 by mistake than let one slip through. And I know you want to find the vampire king, but I don't think he's here. The vampire king isn't stupid. He's badly injured, and this place is heavily guarded. He wouldn't walk into a trap. At that point, Count Rose invited Leia to go home with him again. Leia refused again. Since the king wasn't here, she decided to return to the city and keep searching. No matter how thick-skinned Count Rose was, he could only give up and reluctantly ask for her name. Leia looked back with a smile. My name is Leia. I'm from the Neela family of the northern state. Count Rose fell into thought. The Neela family. That name sounded familiar. Leia returned to the city. Search squads could be seen everywhere in the streets. Judging by the scale of the search, the king should still be inside the city. But with security this tight, all the obvious places must already have been searched. So where would the king hide? Then it occurred to her, the river here connected to the outside of the city. The king might have used the river to escape. I'll search along the river first. Meanwhile, Xibalai was scolding his men. Useless trash. It's been this long, and you still can't catch one heavily wounded vampire? The guards looked terrified. Please calm your anger, your majesty. We searched very carefully, but he seemed to vanish into thin air. He may have abilities we still don't know about. We beg your majesty to give us a little more time. Xibalai sneered. More time? Do you know how strong the vampire king's regenerative ability is? If you still can't find him, then go wait for death in the dungeon. Saying that, Xibalai gave a sinister smile. Verlies, you really are something. You managed to escape even this, but the entire continent is already mine. Even if you appear again in the future, the only path left for you is death. This is a distant historical continent. All kinds of life exist here, and unlike our world of clear day and night, this continent has long stretches of daylight and endless night, known as Jizhou and Jia. The ruler of Jizhou, where the human race, the most numerous life form on the continent, held power, was human emperor Xibalai, and the ruler of Jia was Verlies, the immensely powerful vampire king. Both sides ruled their own territories, maintaining peace for decades. The rapid reproduction of humanity ensured the swift growth of human strength, and human emperor Xibalai gradually revealed his ambition. In order to devour the continent in one stroke before nightfall arrived, the human emperor set a banquet to try to assassinate the vampire king, Verlies. Under the desperate protection of his guards, Verlies escaped with grave injuries and vanished. Fearing Verlies' revenge after his recovery, Xibalai cast a wide net to search and surround him. Though it seemed like a hopeless situation, Verlies' human maid, Leia, stepped forward. While disguising herself, she searched desperately for Verlies' whereabouts. In the end, she concluded that with the city under such heavy guard, Verlies had most likely followed the river out of the city. So she searched along the riverbank and rented a small boat despite the rain. To be safe, Leia didn't hire a boatman. Instead, she rowed by herself, carefully searching along the river while softly calling Verlies' name. The wind grew stronger and the rain poured harder, but there was still no sign of Verlies. Then Leia noticed a school of fish swimming toward the bottom of the boat. More and more fish gathered beneath it, as if trying to overturn it. At last, the boat could bear no more. With a loud splash, Leia was thrown into the water. The river was icy cold, but fortunately, Leia knew at least a little how to swim. When she opened her eyes underwater, she discovered that Verlies was lying beneath the surface. Overjoyed, Leia immediately swam toward him with all her strength, completely forgetting that she was underwater and even trying to call out his name. As a result, she swallowed several mouthfuls of river water. At the critical moment, Verlies, who lay under the water, seemed to react. He suddenly opened his eyes, rose upright in the river, wrapped an arm around Leia's waist, and then pressed his lips to hers, passing air into her mouth. Leia had wanted to save him, but instead Verlies ended up saving her. At last she had finally found Verlies, and Leia anxiously asked how his injuries were. Verlies still looked cold and aloof. "Were you looking for me?" Then he grabbed Leia's hand, his voice icy. "What exactly is your purpose after going to all this trouble?" Leia looked innocent. "What purpose could I possibly have? I was just worried about your safety, so I came to find you." Verlies paused. "Since I failed to protect all of you on this journey, then now you are free." As he said that, Verlies tossed Leia a bag of gold coins and turned away. "Go back. Return to the human world you belong to. After all, you are human." Holding the gold coins, Leia looked confused. "Do you want me to be your temporary housekeeper? Then I'll make sure to safeguard your property well." Verlies frowned. "Do you not understand what I'm saying?" After weathering so much hardship, Leia had finally found Verlies at the bottom of the river. In her joy, she had accidentally swallowed several gulps of river water. Luckily, Verlies awoke in time and saved her. Leia had wanted to save him, but instead Verlies saved her. But at least she had finally found him. Yet when Verlies saw Leia again, he showed not the slightest hint of delight. He remained just as cold and aloof as ever. He even suspected that Leia had gone to all this trouble to find him for some other purpose and told her to leave. But after spending so much time with him, Leia had already figured out what kind of person Verlies was. He was the type who acted cold on the outside, but was warm inside, full of pride and ridiculously smug. So Leia immediately used the right tactic. "The guards in the city are searching everywhere. Even as your maid, I'm not exempt. So I'm scared. I want to stay by your side and be protected by you." Sure enough, the moment she said that, Verlies straightened up like a proud peacock. "So that's what you're thinking. You're clever. You know staying by my side is the right choice." After saying that, he bent down and crouched. "What are you standing there for? Get on. Haven't you noticed your foot is injured? Do I have to invite you personally?" Leia clung to Verlies's back like a koala. The exhaustion and fear of the day vanished in that moment. "The human emperor has already cast a wide net to hunt us down. Shouldn't we return to the castle first?" Verlies shook his head. "Not yet. The steward and the captain of the guards are both in the human emperor's hands. I have to save them first. But before that, I'll get you out of the city." Leia quickly said, "Please take me with you." Verlies looked at her in surprise. "Weren't you afraid? Besides, the human emperor ambushed me, and for now, I can't use the power of the vampires. I don't know if I can fully protect you." Leia smiled brightly. "Precisely because of that, I can't leave you. I know a little basic healing magic, and I can help cover for you too." As they spoke, they came across the overturned boat from earlier. Leia got onto it without hesitation, but Verlies hesitated inwardly. Should he really trust this woman? Ever since the beginning, she had lied to him many times. At the end of the day, she wasn't even a vampire. Still, it wasn't the first time he believed her nonsense. Verlies stopped overthinking and signaled that he would row. But reality was cruel. Verlies, who had been weighted on his whole life, took the oar and rowed for a long time, only to make the boat spin in circles. Leia held back her laughter and took the oar from him, but Verlies felt rather embarrassed. After thinking for a moment, he moved with lightning speed and gave Leia a sudden kiss. Afterward, Verlies turned away proudly under Leia's stunned gaze. "Consider that your reward for rowing so hard." At last, they safely came ashore. Verlies curiously looked at what Leia had taken out. Leia wore a mysterious smile. "Go change your clothes first. We need a disguise." Although it wasn't the first time she'd seen Verlies's body, every time she saw his perfectly sculpted physique, Leia still couldn't help staring dreamily. Seeing that, Verlies looked smug again. "Well, what do you think of my body?" After Leia lavished him with compliments, they finally got to business. Leia took out a bottle of dye and worked it all over Verlies's hair. In no time, Verlies went from a black-haired vampire king to a white-haired handsome rebel. Who would have thought the mighty vampire king would one day be reduced to this? Because the human emperor had severely wounded him through treachery, he could no longer use vampire power. After many twists and turns, he reunited with his maid Leia, who had come searching for him. Verlis originally planned to figure out a way to rescue his subordinates while slowly recovering his strength. But once this lofty king infiltrated a human city, he found himself at a loss. So our clever, smart, and brave Leia stepped up in time. After a bit of fussing with him, Verlis changed from a black-haired cold male god into a white-haired handsome rebel. Then Leia even took out a mirror for him, clearly very satisfied with her hairstyling skills. Verlis smugly admired himself in the mirror. As expected of me, no matter the hairstyle, I still look amazing. Leia quickly dragged Verlis to the next step of the plan. They went to the recruitment board in the city to look for work. Leia's plan, it turned out, was to sneak into the inner circles of the human nobility. Verlis's face instantly darkened. I do not need a job. I cannot afford that humiliation. He immediately turned to leave, but Leia was already enthusiastically promoting them to a recruiter, even introducing Verlis as her husband. The moment Verlis heard that while walking away, he instantly stopped. He couldn't explain the joy in his heart. He even felt a little anticipation. Unfortunately, because the city was currently under lockdown, no one dared hire them without references. But Leia wasn't the type to give up so easily and immediately asked several more recruiters. Yet, without references, they ran into rejection everywhere. Leia couldn't help feeling dejected. Verlis, however, looked unconcerned. None of that matters. What matters is when exactly did I become your husband? Leia blushed slightly. That was only because of the situation. Just then, a female recruiter walked over and said she was Count Rose's maid, asking if they were looking for work. She also said that work at Count Rose's estate didn't require references, because the dress Leia was wearing was more persuasive than any letter of introduction. So the two followed the maid to a courtyard. The moment they entered, something fell off. No matter how they looked at it, this didn't seem like a count's residence. Then the steward inside explained that this was a separate villa specially prepared by the count for his lovers. Verlis's face darkened instantly. What kind of job did you find us? He was about to explode on the spot when Leia asked the steward what kind of work she and her husband would be doing. The moment Verlis heard the word husband, all his anger instantly smoothed out. The job Leia was assigned was preparing meals for the master. Verlis, meanwhile, was put in charge of caring for the horses. The steward led them to their quarters, gave a few instructions, and left. The room was dusty everywhere, clearly unoccupied for a long time. Leia immediately began cleaning. Verlis also voiced the doubt in his heart. When did you meet this count? And the dress you're wearing, he gave it to you too, didn't he? Leia answered frankly, yes. I met him at the human emperor's banquet before, and yes, he gave me this dress. This was probably the third time Verlis's mentality snapped that day. You already pledged yourself to someone else. So why come back to me? At last, Leia understood. Are you upset that I'm wearing a dress someone else gave me? Verlis turned his head away arrogantly. I don't care in the slightest. Truly stubborn. Who would have thought that aloof Verlis could be this cute when he was jealous? Had he forgotten? He was the noble vampire king. He couldn't just see Leia and immediately get lost in romance. He still had many subordinates waiting to be rescued. He still needed revenge on human Emperor Xibalai, so that man would understand what the fury of the vampire king truly meant. Even though this is a romantic and beautiful story, shouldn't the proper business still come first? Unfortunately, Verlis clearly couldn't hear that kind of commentary. Right now, he was still proudly expressing his dissatisfaction over Leia wearing clothes given by someone else, forcing Leia to coax him like a child with one round of soothing words after another. With acting skills, delivery, and that face, she'd be a perfect romantic drama heroine in a modern setting. Then Leia used her trump card. I hope your majesty can look past appearances and feel everything with your heart. I've never had any other thoughts. I've always only wanted to stay by your side. Please, try to trust me. Pure-hearted Verlis had never experienced anything like this before. He was instantly moved beyond words. Not fooled, definitely moved. He quickly apologized for doubting Leia. Then he remembered that he was the vampire king, and he still had an image to maintain. So he added with an arrogant expression, I can grant you one wish. Whatever you want, just say it. Leia's eyes lit up at once. I've wanted to touch your majesty's 8-pack abs for ages. But then she felt that such a rare chance would be wasted if she only asked to touch his abs. Verlies looked speechless, but since things had already come this far, he gritted his teeth, pulled off his clothes, and said, "Go ahead. Tonight, I'll indulge you." The next second, however, he pulled Leia into his arms with a wicked smile. "You call me your husband all day today, so now I'll fulfill a husband's duties." Honestly, unbelievable. At a time like this, those two still had the mood to spend a passionate night together. When morning came, Leia stretched and discovered that Verlies was still asleep beside her. Truly, even Verlies' sleeping face was devastatingly handsome. Leia couldn't help reaching out and poking his chiseled, carved-looking face again and again. But strangely, Verlies didn't move at all. There was no reaction. Leia immediately sensed that something was wrong, because Verlies was always extremely alert. Leia realized that Verlies had once again fallen unconscious due to the poison from the earlier ambush. With no better idea, she took out a small knife, cut her wrist, and let fresh blood drip into Verlies' mouth. After all, he was a vampire. Hopefully this would work. Sure enough, not long after, Verlies opened his eyes. Leia was overjoyed. "My king, you're finally awake. Why did you faint just now?" Verlies took Leia's hand and kissed it deeply. "There is no king here. There is only your husband, Verlies. As for why I suddenly fell unconscious, that begins with the vampire progenitor. It was a very, very long time ago. Long, long ago, on this continent of Ishur, the ancient and mysterious vampire race descended quietly. They fed on humans and ravaged the world. At that time, a brave human girl named Ailey appeared and tried to stop the vampire king. Her unusual heart and kindness deeply attracted the vampire king, Akasi. Their meeting was full of fate's design, and gradually, they fell in love. But sadly, good times did not last. Ailey died in an accident, and the vampire king, heartbroken beyond measure, decided to sleep forever in that place, seeking eternal oblivion. Many years later, the human race was invaded by the Wolf clan and faced extinction. Human Emperor Amir voluntarily offered up the people of 3 cities and awakened the Vampire King. The two sides reached an agreement. The Vampire King led the vampire race in repelling the Wolf army. The Human Emperor promised to offer blood slaves generation after generation in exchange for vampire protection, and Jijo and Jia were placed under separate governance. Thus, the Vampire King built his ancient castle in the far north, between the human territories, using the lives and overwhelming military power of the vampires to block the many northern invaders. And this arrangement has lasted until now. Hearing this, Leia couldn't help asking anxiously, but if the current human emperor tears up the agreement, what should be done? Verlies looked indifferent. What else can be done? The human emperor broke the agreement first. Then our vampire race will no longer honor its promise either. Leia suddenly understood. No wonder a vampire guard had shouted while being executed that the human emperor was dishonorable and faithless. Verlies' eyes changed. I will settle this debt with the human emperor. He probably hasn't realized that if the race in the far north learns this news, then without our vampires holding them back, they will surely invade the human lands again. At that, Verlies got to his feet. One step at a time. Let's go out and take a look first. The two arrived at Verlies' assigned workplace, the stables. Verlies was speechless again. He was the great vampire king. There was no way he would do this kind of work. But Leia was drawn instead to a little horse in the stable. What a gentle little horse. It's so adorable. Hearing that, Verlies lifted a hand and snapped his fingers. At once, a winged, horned little heavenly horse came galloping through the air. Verlies looked at Leia with affection. "Do you like horses? Look at this one. Do you like it?" Then he swung himself onto the horse. "Beautiful lady, may I have the honor of taking you for a ride?" Leia happily climbed onto the little flying horse. "The honor is mine." Immediately, the little horse carried them both racing through the sky, galloping among the clouds. The beautiful, magnificent scenery filled Leia with wonder. It's so beautiful. It feels like a dream. I never imagined I'd get this close to the clouds. After saying that, Leia happily turned to look at Verlies behind her, only to find his eyes burning with intensity. "Do you want to kiss me again?" Leia blushed at once and quickly turned away. "No, really no. There's no need to guess what happened next." Verlies pulled Leia into his arms and spoke in a domineering voice. "But really, Verlies, couldn't this wait? You've already had plenty of romance. Shouldn't you handle some proper business now? You still have subordinates to save. You still need your revenge. Could we please put romance on hold for a bit?" Never had there been such a carefree vampire king. After being schemed against by the human emperor, He wasn't in a hurry to take revenge, nor to rescue his trapped people. Instead, he transformed into a white-haired handsome rebel and started a romance with his human maid. To be fair, though, it wasn't entirely his fault. On one hand, he had been grievously injured by the human emperor's plot and hadn't fully recovered yet. On the other hand, Maid Leia really was beautiful, a kind of beauty that was clear-eyed and a little foolish. That day, on a whim, Verlies tossed aside his work entirely. He summoned a little flying horse and took Leia soaring among the clouds. Romantic really was romantic. This was much cooler than a carriage ride. But clearly, Verlies had other ideas. Once the mood turned tender, he pulled Leia into his arms and kissed her fiercely. Men, after all, even vampire kings, turn into hopeless beasts in front of the woman they like. And that still wasn't enough. Completely intoxicated, Verlies made the little horse fly even higher, while using his remaining magic to gather the surrounding clouds. In an instant, a natural barrier formed all around them. As one piece of clothing after another fell away, the narration came to a perfect, abrupt halt. Just take this as plot's summary. Don't take it too seriously. After quite a while, the clouds finally dispersed and the air cleared. The poor little horse was blushing all over. Just then, an urgent assembly whistle suddenly sounded from the villa below. The owner of the villa must be returning. The two immediately hurried back, since they couldn't spend all their time just being in love. At the very least, they still remembered they had jobs to do. As a carriage slowly rolled into the estate. Sure enough, the master of the villa was the amorous Count Rose. But what no one expected was that the woman he stepped down with while tenderly holding her hand was actually Leia's younger sister from earlier chapters, the pitiful and hateful Neela. Leia was so shocked she couldn't speak. Wasn't her sister supposed to be at the castle? How had she ended up here? Verlies, however, wasn't surprised at all. He gently patted Leia's head, signaling her not to show herself. Don't be shocked. You may not truly understand your sister. At that moment, Neela, who had just walked past, seemed to notice a very familiar figure. But when she turned back to look carefully, the figure was already gone. After Count Rose led Neela into the villa, Leia remained frozen in shock. Verlies patiently explained, "We're here because the most dangerous place is the safest place. As for your sister appearing here, that was her own choice. What a pair of beautiful sisters, both lovely and graceful, and yet burdened with such tragic fates. It is said that younger sister Neela was born with a serious illness and needed the vampire king's blood as medicine to recover. To save her sister, the elder sister, Leia, went alone to the sinister vampire castle and, after countless efforts, finally succeeded in obtaining the vampire king's blood. Yet unexpectedly, she was betrayed by her own brother and sold into a slave market, where she suffered endless torment. Now, with a second chance at life, Leia still thinks constantly about saving her sister, never imagining that Neela's twisted psychology had already taken shape. On one hand, Neela exploited Leia's sympathy. On the other, she schemed in every way possible to replace her sister. Later, when Leia and the Vampire King were being hunted by the human emperor, Neela immediately threw herself into the arms of Count Rose of the human race. This scene left Leia both shocked and deeply confused. But now that they were all in Count Rose's villa, there would eventually be a chance to meet and ask clearly. Meanwhile, Neela was dining with Count Rose. After only one bite, she became certain that the familiar figure from earlier had been her sister. After all, she knew her sister's cooking better than anyone. Once the meal ended, Neela went straight into the arms of her new patron, Count Rose. It didn't take long before the two of them were quickly stripped bare, like a track-like, and the two rolled into bed together. Once their passion passed, Neela immediately exercised the authority of the villa's mistress and impatiently ordered the steward to summon the cook. When the sisters met, Leia looked especially happy, but Neela spoke in a sharp, mocking tone. "My dear sister, how did you end up here working as a cook?" Leia hurriedly explained. "After the human emperor launched his coup, Count Rose saved my life. Then by chance, I came here and became a cook." Neela's heart skipped. Count Rose had saved her. Could it be that the flirtatious Count was interested in her sister too? No, she couldn't let her sister ruin her comfortable life. She had worked so hard to secure Count Rose as her support. Thinking this, Neela urgently grabbed Leia's hand. "Sister, your identity is troublesome. It's not suitable for you to stay here. You need to leave at once." Leia was helpless. "I can't go into hiding right now. They're hunting everywhere outside, and I don't have a single coin on me. I have nowhere to go." But the moment Neela heard that, she flung Leia's hand away. Are you asking me for money? Back when you were favored by the Vampire King, you didn't care whether I lived or died. You didn't even obtain his blood for me. And now you still want me to help you? Hearing her sister accuse her like that, Leia was heartbroken. I didn't ignore you. The king's blood wasn't so easy to obtain. And I'm only working here. I wasn't asking you for money. You could just pretend you don't know your own sister. Neela simply dropped all pretense and laid bare the jealousy in her heart. My dear sister, back at the castle you rose up by pleasing the Vampire King. Do you think I'd leave someone like you by the count's side? Sister, you're really beautiful. If I had even half your looks, I could win over any man I wanted. Over one white-haired handsome man. These two sisters completely cast aside their bond and tore their relationship apart. The younger sister envied the older sister's extraordinary beauty. The excellent men around them always chose the elder sister and ignored her. As for Leia, everything she did had originally been for Neela's illness, but sadly, she had fallen irretrievably into the whirlpool of love. Now things had changed. Neela had thrown herself into the arms of a human count for the sake of a better life, while Leia, hiding from danger, had ended up becoming a servant in the count's estate. When they met again, there was no sisterly affection. Neela openly declared that she would drive Leia out of the count's residence. Hearing that, Leia was terribly disappointed. So you finally said what's truly in your heart. Back at the castle, were you only pretending all along? Inside, the sisters were locked in confrontation. Outside, Count Rose knocked at the door. Afraid that the Count might see Leia, Neela motioned for her to leave quickly. Instead, Leia looked completely calm. The Count invited me here himself before. He even gave me new clothes. Neela spat out a harsh threat. Fine, we'll see how you manage to stay. Back in her room, Leia was still troubled. How did Neela become like this? She wasn't like this when we were little. Verlice looked like someone who had seen it all before. Sometimes people don't change. They just hid themselves too well, and you failed to see it. Leia followed up at once. Then, Verlice, I've already seen you clearly. Those words were like a spark that lit Verlice instantly. Verlice pushed Leia down once more. I can give you time and opportunity to keep seeing me clearly. After the vigorous activity, Verlice felt a bit hungry. Leia, curled up under the blanket, said there was still braised beef in the kitchen. Hearing that, Verlice told Leia to go fetch some from the kitchen while he went outside first to listen for any news. But as soon as Leia reached the kitchen, she saw a maid storming toward her with a bowl of soup. You cook, what kind of thing did you make? She shouted, then smashed the bowl heavily to the ground. Miss Neela says it tastes awful. Make it again. Leia tasted some, confused. There was nothing wrong with the flavor. Neela had liked this soup since childhood. But the maid barked, who asked for your opinion? Why are you talking so much? If Miss Neela says remake it, then hurry up. Leia immediately had a bad feeling. Neela was clearly causing trouble on purpose. Still, she said nothing and quickly prepared a new dish. Out of jealousy, the younger sister deliberately made things difficult for the elder sister. One lunch was redone over and over, every version rejected. By the time it had been remade 23 times, lunch had practically become dinner. Yet Neela still demanded that Leia start over again. What was the use of women making life hard for other women, especially when they were blood sisters? But as the cook, Leia had no choice. Making food the master liked was her duty. So Leia began preparing lunch for the 24th time. With the maid hurrying her from the side, Leia made a mistake in her rush and accidentally cut her index finger. The maid immediately scolded her. You've got some nerve. Don't you dare let blood get into the food. I'll be back for it soon. At that moment, Verlice finished what he was doing and came to the kitchen to see Leia. When he saw that her finger had been cut, he stopped the bleeding first without another word. After hearing what had happened, Verlice offered to prepare the dish himself. He guaranteed that Neela wouldn't be able to find a single fault with it. One taste, and she'll never forget it for the rest of her life. Leia had never expected the Vampire King to know how to cook. Just as she was about to help, she suddenly noticed that after Verlice treated her, her finger had already healed. Soon the dish was finished, and this time Leia delivered it herself. But Neela only took a small bite, before immediately showing an expression of intense pain and collapsing onto the table. The maid beside her panicked and quickly helped Neela up. My stomach hurts so much. What exactly did you feed me? Did you poison me? Then she called for the guards to seize Leia. Leia argued loudly. No matter what, I would never poison you. Besides, I tasted the soup myself. There was nothing wrong with it. If you don't believe me, you can have the maid search me. Clutching her stomach, Neela snapped, "I drank your soup, and now my stomach hurts terribly. What else is there to argue about?" She immediately ordered the guards to drive Leia out of the Count's estate. Leia fought back fiercely. "You have no right to throw me out, and you have no proof that I poisoned you. We can find a doctor to examine you. Unless you're feeling guilty and trying to hurry me out." At that point, to convince everyone, Neela had no choice but to send for a doctor. Looking at Neela's pained expression, Leia thought she really did seem to be in agony. She had no idea what Verlice had put into the soup. Who would have thought that these two sisters, who had grown up together since childhood, would end up facing each other like enemies as adults? The younger sister resented the elder sister for being more beautiful and for earning the favor of the Vampire King. Not only did she make things difficult for her in every way, she also wanted to drive her out of the Count's estate. Fortunately, Leia was no easy target either. With the help of the Vampire King Verlice, she got Neela to eat a special lunch that caused severe stomach pain for reasons no one could identify. Left with no choice, Neela could only summon a doctor. But even after examining her for a long time, the doctor couldn't find the cause. His conclusion was that she might simply be allergic to one of the ingredients. Leia immediately said, "Since it's been proven that I didn't do anything, may I leave now?" This result enraged Neela beyond measure, but there was nothing she could do. That night, Leia asked Verlice curiously what exactly he had put in the dish to make Neela's stomach hurt so much that even the doctor couldn't find the cause. Verlice smiled faintly. "Nothing much, really. Just a little yimingxia." Then she added, "Yimingxia is a miraculous traditional medicine. To put it bluntly, it's bat droppings." Liao was speechless, but also found it a little funny. Only you could come up with such a nasty method. What she hadn't expected was that her own younger sister would become like this. Verlice pulled Leia into his arms. "Don't be sad. Sometimes it's not that a person has changed, but that they no longer feel the need to keep hiding who they are." In the study, Neela had no other choice. She could only write to her patron, Count Ross, asking for help. Though Count Ross was a womanizer, he treated his own women fairly well. The moment he heard that Neela was unwell, he rushed over in a panic. Seeing Neela asleep, Count Ross did not leave. A doting smile appeared on his face as he whispered, "My lady, wake up. I brought back what you wanted." Those words seemed almost magical. Neela, who had been sleeping deeply, jolted awake at once and lunged at Count Ross in a frenzy. "Hurry, give it to me. My stomach hurts so much." Ross took out a small bottle containing a mysterious blue liquid. Neela snatched it and swallowed it in one gulp. Instantly, she calmed down as if she had been restored to life. A good-born young lady. Why ruin yourself like this? She had once been a youthful, sweet girl in the bloom of life. But out of jealousy for her sister's beauty and the exclusive favor her sister received from the king of the vampires, Neela set foot on a road of no return. She latched onto a human count, wanted to get rid of her sister as soon as possible. But in the end, her cleverness backfired, and she herself tasted the torment of living like a fiend. Fortunately, her patron, Count Ross, arrived in time and eased her symptoms. As repayment, Neela and Count Ross naturally ended up entangled together once more beneath the red canopy. Afterward, Neela struck while the iron was hot, coquettishly asking Count Ross to drive her sister Leia out. What the Count didn't know was that her sister Leia was currently in his own household. Otherwise, the one being thrown out would be Neela herself. Count Ross said it was a critical time right now. The human emperor was still hunting down the king of the vampires, and a new cook would not be easy to find. Then he abruptly changed the subject and told Neela to have her family prepare ships as quickly as possible so he could head north and open up a new market. Seeing that the Count needed something from her, Neela smugly tried to negotiate terms. But a violent pain suddenly twisted through her stomach, and Neela could only excuse herself and hurry to the washroom. After a miserable bout of vomiting and diarrhea, Neela dragged her weakened body along, gritting her teeth in hatred. She blamed her sister for everything she had become today. If Leia had gotten the Vampire King's blood for her, why would she ever have had to fawn over Count Ross? When the day came that she recovered, she would definitely make them pay. Just then, she realized Count Ross was gone. After asking around, she learned from the butler that Count Ross had already left. Before leaving, he had also sent a message. If Neela still didn't have her family prepare the ships, the Count might not have time to come again. That sentence enraged Neela so much she kicked the door to pieces. So they all saw her as nothing but a toy to be used? If she didn't currently depend on what he had in his hands, with her beauty and wealth, what kind of man couldn't she get? The more Neela thought about it, the angrier she became. Unable to suppress the fury in her heart, she decided to take it out on her sister. The butler told her that the cook had come together with her husband, who was now working in the stables. Neela immediately found it strange. Since when did her sister have a husband? She promptly went to the stables and saw the vampire king, Vilis, washing the horses. Because Vilis had previously been disguised by Leah's clever hands, Neela failed to recognize him right away. She only thought the man was very handsome. "So you're my sister's husband? Well then, my dear brother-in-law, your little sister-in-law is here." It wasn't as if the girl had never seen a handsome man before, but her adrenaline shot through the roof. Without caring about anything else, she pressed herself close to him, fawning over him and openly flirting. Since she had heard that the man before her was her brother-in-law, she became all the more determined to make him one of her conquests. Neela had always been deeply jealous that her sister Leah was prettier than she was, and that every man around them liked her sister while ignoring her. So Neela had sworn to steal everything her sister possessed, even her brother-in-law. Thus, after being clearly rejected when she tried to flirt with Vilis, Neela still put on a pitiful, delicate expression, clung to Vilis, and insisted that he teach her how to ride a horse. She even deliberately invited more intimate contact to create opportunities to get close to him. The audacity of that move was truly something else. Vilis had had enough of being harassed, so he pretended to agree to ride the same horse with Neela. Neela immediately revealed that classic fake sweet, worshipful smile. But unexpectedly, the quietly nasty Vilis had no intention of playing along. After coaxing Neela into getting on the horse first, he directly lashed the horse's rear with a whip. Before Neela's disbelieving eyes, the horse took off at full speed, carrying her away amid shrill screams. "Vilis, you really don't know how to appreciate what's delivered to your door. If you don't want the green tea type, fine, but there's no need to throw her away like that." Just then, Leah happened to see Neela galloping off in spectacular fashion. She didn't even need to think about it. It had to be Vilis up to no good again. She did find it rather satisfying, but she still told Vilis to keep a lower profile. After all, they were living under someone else's roof right now. It was just a casual remark from Leah, yet it made love-struck Vilis' head heat up again. He pulled Leah back into his arms once more. He was hugging and clinging to her countless times a day. A vampire king who had lived for hundreds of years was acting like a little boy who had never been in love. Truly exasperating. All right, at last, the plot finally returns to the showdown between the human emperor and the vampire king. Emperor Xibalai had searched the city for so long, yet had not found even a single hair of Vilis. The only clue was that Vilis had disappeared by the riverside outside the city. This infuriated Emperor Xibalai because he knew that once Vilis recovered his strength, it would be the day of his own destruction. Boundless fear mixed with anger, and Xibalai had nowhere to vent it. He directly ran a guard through with his sword. "Intensify the search. If I can't kill him while he's weak, then I'll kill all of you instead." Of all people to provoke, he just had to provoke the vampire king. Only now did he realize disaster was imminent, but it was already too late. He had once been the exalted emperor of the human race, driven by the ambition to unify the continent. He plotted to murder the vampire king, Vilis. Who could have expected that Vilis would be so powerful that he escaped alive? As time passed, the human emperor, Xibalai, became more and more uneasy and afraid, because he knew that once Vilis returned fully healed, it would be the hour of his ruin. That day, after dealing with officials who had failed in the search, Xibalai walked the streets with bloodstains all over him, dispirited and lost. Suddenly, a woman's voice called out to him from behind. It was Leah, the cook, who had gone out to buy groceries. Kind by nature, when she saw the blood all over Xibalai, she stopped him and treated his wounds. Looking at the bandaged injury, Xibalai asked, "Everyone avoids me. Why aren't you afraid of me?" Leah smiled brightly. "If you were a bad person, how could you be wandering the streets in broad daylight? You must have run into something terrible. Does anything else hurt? I could put some medicine on it. Don't be shy. Besides, I live at Count Ross's estate. If you're in trouble, you can come find me anytime." Cold-hearted as Xibalai was, he could still feel the kindness of the girl before him. Back at Count Ross's estate, after finishing the work at hand, Leah hurried eagerly to see Vilis. The moment she stepped inside, she was delighted to find that Vilis was circulating magical power through his entire body. "My king, have you started recovering your strength?" Vilis smiled and nodded. "I can already control part of my power." Leah bared her long, fair neck. "Then why not drink my blood, my king? Wouldn't it help you recover faster?" Needless to say, the love-addled Vilis pulled Leah into his arms once again. "You don't need to do that for me, but you could do something else for me." There is no need to describe what happened next. Naturally, it was another intimate scene beneath the red canopy. Only after the clouds had dispersed and the wind had calmed did Leah remember something important. 7 days later, the imperial palace would be holding a banquet. It would be a good chance to infiltrate the palace and rescue the guard and the steward. At last, after several episodes of romance, Vampire King Vilis finally remembered that he had serious matters to attend to. If he kept delaying, all his subordinates might be slaughtered by the human emperor Xibalai. But considering that Vilis was still injured, a frontal assault would not be wise. 7 days later, when the human emperor held the noble banquet, it would be the perfect opportunity. They could enter the banquet by following the count's entourage. This trip would be a deep venture into enemy territory, extremely risky. Vilis told Leah to stay behind and wait for news instead of going with him. But given Leah's stubborn personality, that was easier said than done. Sure enough, Leah immediately went to the Count Estate's butler and earnestly begged him to put her on the list of attendants accompanying the Count to the banquet. She even took out her treasured jewelry to bribe him. The butler accepted the jewels and looked Leah up and down, assuming that she was just another scheming woman trying to use her beauty to climb into the world of power. He had seen plenty of such things before. Since it was only a trivial favor and there were benefits to be had, he readily agreed. Little did they know that the very person they had been thinking about, the human emperor Xibalai, had already arrived at Count Ross's estate. His purpose in coming was simple. He wanted to see the kind cook who had cared for him on the street earlier. The moment he entered the Count's estate, Xibalai got straight to the point and told Count Ross to summon all the women in the estate. Soon, everyone had gathered. The human emperor carefully searched for that beautiful figure, while Count Ross was doing his best to introduce his lover, namely, Leah's younger sister, Neela. It was obvious that Neela had dressed up carefully this time. Rarely did she have a chance to stand before the human emperor, so she flaunted all her charm. But Xibalai's gaze was fixed firmly on Leah, standing to the side. Neela's display only disgusted him. "Count Ross, your taste in women truly leaves much to be desired. In both beauty and bearing, she is far inferior to the girl behind you." At once, every eye in the room turned toward Leah. Leah herself looked utterly baffled. "Why me again? I just want to stand here quietly and be a beautiful girl. I didn't do anything." Neela was so angry, she nearly ground her teeth to dust. Why was it that every time a high-quality man appeared, Leah had to steal him away? Xibalai, meanwhile, looked at Leah and thought, "I made such a grand entrance and posed for so long. Don't tell me she still didn't recognize who I am." The next episode will be even more exciting. Vilis will transform into a crafty strategist and win Count Ross over to his side. Coming soon, so stay tuned. Want to know what a true female lead anime is? It's when no matter how much national hatred or family revenge the male lead is carrying, or how vicious and brutal the villain is, the moment they meet the heroine, they instantly fall from grace and become hopeless romantics. I think I've fallen for you. Are you crazy? Human Emperor Xibalai, after just one glance at the heroine, Leah, on the street, was stunned by her beauty in that fleeting moment. He immediately threw aside a pile of state affairs and eagerly ran off, wanting to play out a domineering ruler falls in love drama. Unfortunately, even after Xibalai revealed his identity as the human emperor and struck poses for quite a while, the admiration he had imagined never came. Leah truly seemed uninterested. Quite helpless, Xibalai could only leave. But before going, he did not forget to instruct Count Ross. At the court banquet in 7 days, remember to bring Leah with you. It seemed Xibalai would not give up until he won Leah over. After all, Leah was the first woman who had made the human emperor come to her personally, only to treat him with utter indifference. After the human emperor left, Count Ross grew more afraid the more he thought about it. From the hints Xibalai had dropped that night, it seemed his ambition to unify the continent meant he was about to launch another war against the North. Count Ross came from a merchant background and his main business was trade with the North. That would mean his family would lose its economic backbone. This gave the vampire king, Vilis, who was disguised as a stable hand, the opportunity he had been waiting for. Pretending to be concerned, he asked after the situation, while in truth he was trying to persuade Count Ross to defect. The facts proved that as long as Liao was not by his side, the vampire king Vilis still had his brain working perfectly. After analyzing the pros and cons, Count Ross agreed to mix several soldiers into the group going to the court banquet. Once everything was prepared, Vilis, in excellent spirits, returned to his room and found Liao, and the two shared another bout of intimacy. No need to go into details here. As for what happened next at the palace banquet, we'll see it in the next episode. The long-awaited return of the Vampire King had finally come. And indeed, it proved once again that as long as the Vampire King was not busy being in love, his head worked just fine. Since he was injured, they would take the clever route instead. According to the original plan, the Vampire King Vilis used his identity as a stable hand to fool the guards and successfully infiltrate the human emperor's palace. But just as he was preparing to act, one casual glance to the side left him extremely annoyed. He had repeatedly told Leon not to come, and yet she had still sneaked in. But there was no help for it. His woman had to be pampered no matter what. So Vilis summoned his little pet, Xiao Ding, and had it stay close to protect Lia while relaying information. At that moment, at the palace banquet, human Emperor Zibalai was bored out of his mind. Watching one noble after another greet and salute him, he found the endless formalities unbearable. So the human emperor waved a hand to stop them and proposed that everyone play a game instead. The game was called the True King and the False King. Anyone present who wished to become king could sit on the throne and experience it for themselves. Having said that, he directly called on Count Ross to join the game and sit on the throne. Count Ross was terrified. Could it be that the king had already discovered his intention to rebel? Ross desperately tried to refuse the throne, but how could he resist the human emperor's forcefulness? The emperor had Ross pushed down into the seat and told him to raise his head and look. Trembling, Count Ross looked up and nearly collapsed on the spot. Hanging directly above the throne was a gleaming sword. Meanwhile, the little bat relayed the scene at the banquet to Lia in real time and told her that Vilis was currently waiting for the right opportunity to act. The moment Lia heard that, she got excited. If Vilis was preparing to make his move, then she couldn't just stay idle. She had to go support him. Heaven knows what was going through Lia's little head, but she gathered a huge bouquet of flowers and simply strolled into the banquet hall holding them. The rest gets even better. We'll talk about it next time. Being love-struck really can ruin things. What should have been a proper revenge battle between the humans and the vampires had its whole tone completely derailed by this woman. The human emperor Zibalai had painstakingly arranged the banquet to lure out the vampire king's forces and wipe them out in one sweep. Yet at this moment, he ignored the heavily guarded surroundings and also ignored the adoring glances from all the fangirls around him, because the only one in his eyes was the beautiful heroine, Lia. Honestly, Your Majesty, you are the human emperor. At a critical moment like this, could you please calm down a little? Put romance aside for once. The Vampire King is right below watching, but human Emperor Zibalai paid no attention at all and walked straight toward Lia. Then, like a boy who had never been in love before, he dropped to one knee with a thump, extended his right hand, and gazed at Lia affectionately as if proposing. Well, not quite. He was actually inviting Lia to dance with him, but really just to ask a girl for a dance. Was all this drama necessary? This scene also made the girls at the banquet so jealous they nearly bit through their teeth. Why did such a good thing never happen to them? As for Lia, she was completely bewildered. She had come here so the Vampire King could deal with him, and now he was kneeling on one knee and inviting her to dance. It made it awkward for her to make a move. Meanwhile, the Vampire King Vilis, who had been lying in wait, saw the human emperor openly flirting with his woman and was instantly enraged. Forgetting that this was enemy territory, he directly ran over and struck the challenge drum. Hearing the drum, the human emperor shouted in surprise. It's been many years since anyone dared beat the challenge drum and demand a duel with me. But why does this man look so familiar? He had no time to think further. However, this was the perfect chance to show off before everyone and to make this beautiful lady completely surrender to his charm. But the Vampire King Vilis was no less forceful. He tore off his shirt in one motion and directly confronted the human emperor. Fine then, the long-awaited fated battle between the human race and the vampires started ahead of schedule because of one woman. The exciting battle continues shortly. Stay tuned. Originally, in the public imagination, vampires were dark and evil creatures, especially in our culture, which has its own vast and magnificent mythological system. Creatures like vampires were, at most, just minor ghosts, not particularly impressive. But with the influence of European and American film and television works, such as the Twilight series, which added elements like youth, beauty, and romantic love, vampire-themed works gradually became globally popular year after year. Our country was no exception. In earlier years, classic dramas, such as My Date with a Vampire, are still revisited repeatedly even now by many young viewers born after 2000. The same is even more true in the ever-growing world of animation. Today, let me share with everyone a vampire anime with an exceptionally beautiful art style. The girl Ya had originally been a pure and adorable girl next door type, but in order to save her younger sister's life, she went alone to a terrifying and gloomy vampire castle, and thus began a lingering yet hilarious love story with the vampire king, Vilis. Up to this point, one might have thought that was all there was to it, a female lead romance story meeting a vampire king. Yet unexpectedly, the story later suddenly turned hot-blooded. The human emperor Xibalai, in order to dominate the continent, tore up the peace agreement he had signed with the vampire king and laid a trap in an attempt to kill Vilis. Fortunately, Vilis was powerful enough to fight desperately and escape despite being seriously wounded. Afterward, under Leah's careful care, he gradually recovered his strength while disguising himself and waiting for a chance to take revenge. Meanwhile, human emperor Xibalai sank into endless fear because Vilis had escaped. No one knew better than he did that once Vilis returned healed, he would be unable to withstand the wrath of the vampire king. In order to uproot the threat once and for all, human emperor Xibalai used the vampire king's subordinates as bait and set another trap to lure Vilis into showing himself. Without any surprise, Vilis and Leah infiltrated the palace separately, and the two kings of the continent began a fierce confrontation. The vampire king Vilis successfully, and the exciting story was only just beginning. If you're interested, you may as well check out the full collection. Here it comes, he finally came, though a little late. And many people watching this anime may already have left. The showdown between the human emperor and the vampire king finally arrived after all. The human emperor Xibalai did not summon human experts to assist him, and the vampire king Vilis did not use dark magic either. The two tacitly chose the most manly way to settle things. Face-to-face, swordsmanship, and blows landing solidly. The thrilling duel had the noble fangirls by the sidelines, screaming nonstop. By contrast, Liao was so nervous she didn't even dare open her eyes. After fighting for countless rounds, Vilis spotted an opening, seized the opportunity, and slashed out with his sword. A burst of blood flashed through the air. Human Emperor Xibalai's face twisted with pain, and clutching his wounded abdomen, he fell to his knees. Who would have thought Xibalai would be such a sore loser this time? He actually summoned a large number of guards to besiege Vilis. Vilis, however, remained calm as ever, looking at the kneeling Xibalai. The last time he came to a banquet, Xibalai had tricked him. Now that he had come to another banquet, how could he possibly have made no preparations? Suddenly, Xibalai felt a wave of dizziness in his head. The guards also began to sway and lose their footing. Vilis and Leah exchanged a smile. It was a hallucinogenic drug they had arranged together. Seizing the chance, the two quickly acted according to plan, rescued the vampires imprisoned by Xibalai, and headed west all the way back to the vampire castle. Leah asked curiously why Vilis had simply let human Emperor Xibalai go. That was completely unlike his usual decisive style. Vilis sighed. People have many misunderstandings about the vampire race. In truth, vampires do not wish to interfere in human affairs. Eliminating the human emperor would be easy, but the human race cannot simply be disregarded. I only hope that in the future we can live in peace. All things in this world exist for a reason. Hearing this, Liao was deeply moved. Inside the carriage, she even wanted to thank Vilis properly. Unexpectedly, Vilis gently stopped her, which was rare for him, saying that now was not the time. There's a good show coming. Up ahead of the carriage, Neela had brought people from the Count's estate to block the road. She declared that if they did not leave her sister Lia behind, then no one would be leaving at all. Lia stepped down from the carriage. Facing her own younger sister, she said that she no longer wished to dwell on the past. Now, she only wanted to say farewell to Neela and to the entire family. She also hoped Neela could live well with the Count. Neela smiled calmly. If the Count didn't have medicine to suppress my illness, how could I possibly have fallen into becoming his plaything? At this point, Neela grew emotional and drew a sword, pressing it to her neck. If you can really abandon your own sister so heartlessly, then I'll die right in front of you. Let's see whether you'll have nightmares in the middle of the night. The following plot is even more exciting, so stay tuned. It has been a while since I narrated this beautiful manga. It's not that I didn't want to, it's just that the story's tone has gone a little off track. In any case, the king of the vampires finally defeated the human emperor and successfully pulled off a king's triumphant return. That also meant that all the bets Neela had placed on the human emperor and the count had completely failed. Left with nowhere to go, she could only turn to the sister she had framed time and again. The older sister had once poured out her heart and soul for the younger, yet the younger had only schemed against and targeted her. Now that Neela had exhausted every evil deed and tasted the consequences, facing a dead end, she resorted to her final trump card. She tried to use her life and their family bond as leverage. If you were Liao, what would you do? If it were me, I'd definitely turn around and leave. Do whatever you want. But unfortunately, our heroine Lia just couldn't harden her heart. She had relied on her younger sister Neela since childhood, and the two sisters had once been very close. Once, the two sisters were captured by an evil witch. In order not to drag her sister down, the younger sister deliberately lured the witch away. But after being caught, she was forced to drink an unknown potion. That was also the reason she had been frail and sickly since childhood. Though the girl had gone astray, Lia ultimately could not bear it. So she pleaded with the vampire king Vilis to let Neela stay and treat her illness. Vilis naturally agreed at once. Although his strength had not yet fully returned to its peak, it only took a casual touch for him to greatly ease Neela's condition. But Vilis was no fool. He knew Neela's cold and selfish nature well, and worried that once she got better, she would stir up trouble again. So he only temporarily relieved Neela's suffering. In other words, whether Neela could be completely cured would depend on her own behavior. If you don't behave well, then you could just say goodbye. Family ties mean nothing when they stand against the vampire race. Watching Vilis settle everything, Leon naturally felt her heart stir, and the two of them once again couldn't resist growing affectionate. As for what happened after that, I wouldn't dare describe it. Everyone can imagine it for themselves. That concludes Neela's little side story for now. On the other side, while Vilis and Liao were returning, they passed through a town and unexpectedly learned that Count Ross had openly launched a coup and pulled the human emperor off the throne. Vilis was not surprised by this, since it was he who had been pushing the Count toward that move from behind the scenes. What did surprise him was that the Count had only exiled the human emperor. Count Ross was not a merciful man. That meant the human emperor had escaped alive. Vilis had guessed correctly. Behind them, the human emperor Zibalai, cloaked in black, was staring at them. Of course, the two of them had no idea, and even if they had, they probably wouldn't have cared much, because any time they had, they spent clinging to each other and enjoying their little world for two. Honestly, it was exasperating. This manga started out with such a grand opening. So how had it become a romance now? How am I even supposed to narrate this? You hardly ever see anyone doing commentary on romance dramas either. In any case, after skipping over another night of passion, dawn came. Lia slowly woke up and stretched her sore waist. It was about time they got down to some serious business, wasn't it? Let me first take a look here. Then, without a care, the little Pegasus spread its wings and took off. With an elegant toss of its head, it flung Zibalai right in front of its mistress, Lia. Lia was stunned by the scene. When she finally came to her senses, she happily threw her arms around the little Pegasus. That was seriously amazing. Completely ignored, Zibalai suffered a second emotional blow. A mighty human emperor reduced to this miserable state, he was so aggrieved he almost passed out. Feeling its master's praise, the little Pegasus grew unbearably smug. Only then did Lia remember poor Zibalai. Seeing that he had taken quite a bad fall, she even thought about finding some medicine for him. But to her surprise, Zibalai was already out of his mind with humiliation. The moment Lia wasn't looking, he tried to sneak away. But at that crucial moment, The little Pegasus clamped its teeth on his Zibalai's sleeve, knocked him flat to the ground, and then followed up with a dashing backward kick. Zibalai was truly on the verge of tears. A dignified human emperor bullied this badly by a horse of all things. Looking at kind-faced Lia, he was utterly despairing. Just let the world end already. Lia helped him onto the horse's back, and they flew straight home. The entire way, he didn't dare try any funny business again. Seeing how obedient Zibalai had become, kind-hearted and beautiful Lia even bandaged his wounds for him. And by this point, it was finally time for our male lead, Willis, to make his entrance. The sight of him bursting through the door made things instantly awkward for all three of them. After a moment of silence, Lia forced an awkward smile and said, "Just hear me out first. You probably won't believe me, but I really did just pick this guy up off the roadside. As for why he's here and why he's like this, well, that's a whole other story." Willis's gaze gradually turned cold. "It's fine. I'm not in a hurry. You can make up the rest of the story slowly." Liao was just about to keep explaining when Zibalai suddenly turned into a total drama queen. He shyly leaned toward Liao, lifted a delicate finger with exaggerated charm, and said, "You really are careless. Your man is right here. So why did you still call me over?" As for what kind of chaotic love triangle showdown came next, if you enjoyed this, don't forget to follow and like, and we'll keep talking in a bit.